things like tomato flowers, eggplant, many of these need to be, they're called the nightshade plant, and they need to be, something needs to shake them.
Oh, okay.
And, so bumblebees are good for that.
Yeah. Is that because the bumblebee is bigger that it shakes it?
They're bigger, yeah. They just have the ability to shake the flower as a buzzing kind of thing.
Okay.
Let's see. Oops. Okay, and then what makes bees so important for pollination?
Well, because the numbers are there when the flower needs them. See, an apple blossom, when it's ready, there's only about a 3-day window for that blossom to be pollinated. You've got to have enough sufficient numbers of insects, and that's where the honeybee comes in. Because if they winter over properly, there'll be 20,000 bees ready to go. Where a bumblebee starts with a single queen, and it's going to take her all summer to build up 1,000 bees. It's too late for the pollination. So, agriculturally speaking, honeybees then are there in large enough numbers. It's like saying Ford Motor has a quota of so many thousand cars in a week's time. You got to have the force there. You got to have the workers to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, same thing. In the hive, you've got to have the number of bees ready to go to pollinate the apple blossom or the blueberry or whatever it is. So that's probably the biggest reason that bees are so important.
Okay. Let's see. Now, I've heard that other bees are also starting to struggle.
They are threatened, especially, well, all the bees are threatened to some degree, partly because of the lack of forage. In other words, plants. We've lost a lot of the plants that are good for other bees, and in addition to honeybees. The increased number of pesticides has killed off bees. Our farming practices have not been very good for the honeybee or any bee.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want to remove all. Well, for example, we're having a speaker come in September from Michigan State, and he's advocating that farmers return to a place where they have zones of wild plants near their crops. They've been just removing them all, and that removes the habitat for all honeybees and other bees.
That was actually one of my questions. If I get to interview a farmer, is would it be economically feasible to start planting wildflowers to attract bees? That was one of the questions that I put down.
Yes, it's been proven that if you could improve the forage area near, let's say, a blueberry patch, that means more insects will be, developing there. That means they'll need more nectar and pollen, and hopefully they'll get on your blueberries or your peaches or your pears, that sort of thing.
So you actually already talked about it. What about colony collapse disorder? What are some of the causes?
Well, there's so many things. It's probably a perfect storm of, well, we'll start with the mites. As I think I told you before, one researcher said there are 3 causes: varroa, varroa, and varroa. So mites they started becoming a real problem in the mid-'80s, the tracheal mite and the varroa mite. And so then we add to it, medications haven't worked. In fact, we may be harming the hive by putting medications in because it gets into the wax. That may interfere with queen development. So we're creating maybe a few of our problems.
Mm-hmm.
The mites are becoming resistant to our chemicals. And then our long, cold winters are definitely a factor. The last 2 winters have been brutal. Bees eat honey all winter long. Not very much, but they build up waste products.
Mm-hmm.
They have to defecate. They have to go on a cleansing flight. We need to have a January thaw, February thaw. We haven't been getting those. So they're stressed by this buildup of waste products. That encourages a disease called nosema, 2 different kinds now. So we just keep adding new problems. So it's probably a combination, and we don't know how this, exactly how this combination works. But as one researcher at Michigan State said, it's a perfect storm. All these factors working together, but getting back to colony collapsing disorder, we actually don't see colony collapsing disorder. Not like the big beekeepers are showing. Uh, in colony collapsing disorder, many of the bees have disappeared, and you'll find a queen with just a few handful of bees. We don't see that. We see bees dying, but not of colony collapsing.
Okay.
It's the big commercial beekeepers who are probably seeing that. Now keep in mind what has happened in beekeeping. In the early days, you had honey mainly for honey. You had bees mainly for honey. Pollination was sort of secondary. Today, for the commercial beekeepers, pollination is the big thing because that's where the money is. Now, you won't believe me when I tell you this, but there's not much money in honey. I mean, I could sell a bottle for a pretty high price, but the big beekeepers who are dealing with honey in 55-gallon drums sell to packers. The packers can buy foreign honey so much cheaper that, and there's a lot of work going into raising the bees, doing the whole process, and so they've gone into pollination. So the typical beekeeper now, the commercial beekeeper, won't even keep their bees here in the wintertime. They'll go down to Georgia or Florida. They get a contract to pollinate the oranges and citrus fruits. Then they take them to California that's where the big money is. And
The almonds, yep.
Then they bring them back to Florida, and then as the spring progresses, they'll move them north. If you come up I-75, they may drop their bees off in Tennessee, Kentucky. They'll have different fruit growers that want bees for pollination, end up in blueberries in Allegan, Michigan, and then repeat, and then keep them up here in the summer. In the fall, take them back down. Now think of that for a minute. You have the stress of movement, and then, but more importantly, not only the physical stress of throwing them on a truck every other day or so, but they're not feeding them properly. They're not getting normal pollen and normal nectar from the flowers, which is nutritionally much better. They're feeding them high fructose corn syrup, which is sugar, but not much else. They're feeding a pollen substitute, which is not nearly as good. They need a variety of pollen to get the proper amino acid balance. So they're creating a lot of the conditions. They're stressing the bees, and in a way, maybe they're asking the bee to do too much.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be? I guess it wouldn't be feasible, but I would, if I wanted to be a commercial beekeeper. Maybe could you set up temporary hives in the states throughout the season, so you'd have a hive running in each state instead of causing that much stress?
You have to think of the logistics of having that many.
Yeah, that many hives.
Like, when I started, I'd have bees in 6 different places, and that got to be a problem to have to go to 6 different. So if a beekeeper has bees in many, many different states, think of the logistics of getting there. You got to check the bees every so often.
Yeah.
So how do you do that unless you have a
You
plane?
pay college students to do it.
We did have a beekeeper who did that.
Yeah.
So it sounds good until you look at the nitty gritty of the logistics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. Have you ever lost any of your hives?
Oh yeah. For the last 2 years, I've lost them all.
Really?
I do a survey every March. We have a major conference at Schoolcraft College in March, and every year I ask the people to fill out my survey. I'll ask them how many hives did you have last fall, October, September, etc. Excuse me. How many do you have now in March? And for 2 years in a row now, we had 60% losses, which gives you some indication of the problems we're having. And I ask them, do you see colony collapsing disorder? No. They're seeing bees starve. They're bees that are, many bees and they're just dead, but not colony collapse.
Okay, and colony collapse disorder is that they're just disappearing. But they're not.
They're in that disease, there'd be a small number of bees with a queen, and all the bees have disappeared. In 1965, we had a similar thing. When I started beekeeping, they had something called the disappearing disease. Not colony collapsing, but it was the same thing. And they researched it for 2 years, and after 2 years of study, They came back with a report. They said that the disappearing disease has disappeared, never knowing what caused it. But since '65, we've added all kinds of problems.
Yeah. Now I read that the pesticides are affecting them, and they might not be able to get back to the hives.
That could be a part of it. But we're seeing, even in areas where we don't see pesticides, we're seeing some of the same things. So pesticides are a factor, but it's not one silver bullet. We can talk about the neonicotinoids, but it's only a small part of the picture, in my mind.
Yeah. Now, how is the honeybee crisis going to affect our agriculture?
Well, if you don't have the pollination, one, the number of apples or the number of blueberries or that's going to be affected. That's going to cut down the production of that plant. The quality is going to be less. The shape of the fruit, like in a strawberry, shape becomes very important in the agricultural world. And the better the pollination, the better it's going to sell. Pumpkins. Kids like big pumpkins. That pumpkin flower is only good for one day. It must be visited a minimum 5 times. The more times that it's visited, the better the pollination, the bigger the pumpkin, given the other factors of enough moisture and so on. So quality, quantity, all this is going to be affected by the lack of pollination.
Now, what does this mean for consumers? Are we going to see...
Well, the cost will obviously go up if you are not getting the crop. Supply and demand, is going to work. If you have fewer blueberries on the markets, they're going to raise the price. And so it's got to be a factor. Yeah.
Do you think that farmers should be responsible for the health of honeybees in terms of the pesticides they use and their effects on the bees' ecosystem by monocultures?
Well, there's a certain responsibility. First of all, the farmers should follow the directions.
Mm-hmm.
Spray at the right time. They should be aware of bees in the area, so that, and you might want to let that beekeeper know that you're going to spray, so the bees can actually be cooped up for a day or so.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain things the farmer can do to work with the beekeeper, avoiding maybe pesticides that are very injurious, follow the directions, watch for wind drift and that sort of thing. So there are many things they can do to help.
And then what else can be done to help the bees?
Well, I think a large part is forage. We've lost a lot of forage. Doing things like this, doing things like more sensible, bee planting. If a city could put in trees that are going to have a flower that has nectar, that's going to be an improvement over a tree that doesn't. So, and individuals can cut down the number of pesticides they're using in their lawn, have less green grass and more other plants.
Clover.
Like he's doing here, he's only going to mow a certain amount, but all that's going to be a prairie back there with bee plants and that sort of thing. So increasing the forage in cities, allow people to keep bees. Don't get frantic because bees can be kept very safely in the city. Ann Arbor's had an ordinance for more than 50 years, and I've never heard of a problem. The ordinance simply says you may not keep more than 2 hives of bees in your backyard. That's all it says. They just passed one in Ypsilanti, and it's like 17 pages because the lawyers get involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, New York now allows it. There's no problem with keeping bees. Do better in the city than they do in the country.
Now, I've seen in one of the articles, it didn't get too in depth, but it said that some municipal cities are pushing for amateur beekeepers, and that there's the resources they'll give them, and like a lot of urban communities. Right. I don't know if Detroit would do it, but I think that'd
Detroit,
be.
Yeah, allows it.
It does? Okay, because that would make sense. Because I know there's a lot of urban farming.
Yeah.
We went to the DIA, and it took picture. They took artists went out and took pictures of all the urban farms and the community farms that are happening in Detroit.
When I started in '65, we had to register our bees. So we knew pretty much if the person cooperated. And there were at least 2,000 hives registered in the city of Detroit. I don't know how many there are today. It's probably down.
Mm-hmm.
But there were many, many people keeping bees on the tops of buildings and so on.
Yeah, there's a big green movement going on in Detroit.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
I want to get involved with the greening of Detroit.
In fact, if you want to Google something, put in Ypsilanti Bee City. They have just agreed to be the first bee city in Michigan. It was just in the news 2 days ago. And they're establishing hives right on the lawn of the city building and so on. So just put in Ypsilanti Bee City, and you can read all about it.
Awesome. And then what alternatives do you recommend for pesticides for farmers and the general public?
Well, try to choose pesticides that are not harmful.
Mm-hmm.
Apply them at the right time. If bees are flying, try to avoid that. Overall, try to cut down the number of pesticides and use more more organic type of remedies.
I saw my mother-in-law is big into trying to use the organic remedies, and she found on Amazon it's a garlic spray.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's a garlic spray that's supposed to work in cities, not really. It doesn't really work in swampy areas, but they had really, really good reviews, and it's a really high quantity garlic. So I've heard, I looked on some reviews of what people were saying they could use. It's just hard when you're researching the internet. How do you know if this stuff's going to work? You don't want to waste your time. I think that's why a lot of people go towards the pesticides. And I used one, I followed the directions, but then I saw a bee going to one of my plants. I'm like, I didn't check for bees. It didn't say on there it would kill bees. Mm-hmm. You open it up, fine print, toxic to bees.
Yeah. They need to do a better job in informing the public.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I believe that is review on there that I just took. Okay, so I'm going to put that link in my presentation, because I have to also give an oral presentation when I turn my paper, and see if any of the students want to go check it out.
So I can look for it on YouTube?
Yeah, you can look for it on YouTube.
Okay. Well, send me an email, and then I'll respond to you with that interview link. You can use it or not use it. You go throw it away or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. And the hives that I have here, see, I had to replace all my bees, but I bought 2 packages, and one, both of them I brought here, but the rest of them are swarms, and I've gotten swarm calls, so I put I checked to make sure. That's what I wanted to do, is to make sure the queen was laying, because the queen must have died, and so I added a new queen. So generally, when you have a new hive, you don't expect any honey the first year, because bees need to store about 80 to 90 pounds of honey for them to live through the winter. I mean, that's the first priority. Mine is not the first priority. But if they make more than 90 pounds, then I'll extract. So in September, I'll probably make a decision, how much honey do I extract this year?
Okay. Now, could you do something like put them in greenhouses?
Not very well. Honeybees do very poorly in greenhouses.
Okay.
Bumblebees do much better. That's why if you have a greenhouse where they're raising tomatoes, they use the bumblebee because it's a good what we call a buzz pollinator. It vibrates the flower. Honeybees don't do that. And they fly into the wind or into the windows, and they just do very poorly in the greenhouse.
Now, to protect them in the winter, could you put one of those plastic greenhouses over them?
I don't leave them here. I take them to my house.